target our community, if you attempt to take advantage of the vulnerable in our community, we will arrest you and bring you to justice.
4:18 a.m., New York City. A Catholic orphanage, $5 million in cash, 122 children locked behind steel doors. Human trafficking and narcotics hidden in plain sight. This dramatized investigation exposes and condemns crimes against children. Let me show you how it happened. At 4:18 a.m., the sirens never sounded. They didn't need to. Federal agents moved in silence as the doors of a New York orphanage came apart under a single command. The sign outside promised mercy. Inside, the lie collapsed in seconds. In the private quarters of the director, Sister Fatima Grace, 43, agents opened a steel safe bolted to the wall. Inside, $5 million in bundled cash and 4.9 kilograms of heroin, vacuum-sealed and ready for distribution. Then came the bedroom. On the bed lay 3 boys, no older than 15 or 16. None were clothed. The room froze. Fatima Grace stood motionless, eyes wide, unable to speak as agents secured the scene. There were no alarms, no explanations, only evidence. Down the hall, behind a locked door, officers found more than 120 children packed into a single room. Thin mattresses, no windows, barely enough air. Some cried, others stared, silent, as if noise had long been punished. In one dawn raid, a place built on charity was exposed as a crime scene. And this was only the surface. What agents found was only the beginning. If you think the truth should never stay buried, comment truth below and keep watching. What agents uncovered after the initial sweep left no room for interpretation. This was not a charity that had failed. It was a criminal operation hiding behind compassion. Behind a locked interior wing, officers breached a reinforced door and discovered 122 children confined inside a space designed for fewer than 30. There were no windows. Air circulation was minimal. Thin mats covered the floor from wall to wall. Children slept inches apart with no privacy and no daylight. Several had not been outside for months. Medical teams documented widespread harm. 72% of the children showed clear signs of malnutrition. 41 had untreated infections requiring immediate care. 19 tested positive for repeated exposure to sedatives. Ages ranged from 6 to 17. Many could not say how long they had been there. Some did not know what day it was. Financial records explained how this continued without intervention. The orphanage received approximately $34 million every month in donations from churches, private foundations, and viral online charity campaigns. Over 5 years, contributions exceeded $2 billion, yet food spending was minimal. There was no formal education program. Medical care existed only when it served operational needs, not the children's well-being. Investigators then uncovered internal ledgers. Children were categorized. Girls were tracked by age. When they reached 18, transfer dates appeared. Files marked them as placed or reunited. In reality, at least 39 girls were quietly moved into external trafficking pipelines. Boys were logged differently. Records showed repeated disciplinary isolation and frequent medical reviews. Witness testimony later confirmed long-term exploitation concealed behind authority and control. As boys approached adulthood, their files ended abruptly, labeled removed. No destinations, no follow-up records. Hidden storage rooms revealed the final confirmation. Surgical tools, blood refrigeration units, sealed medical containers, equipment no legitimate orphanage should ever possess. This was not a place of care. It was a processing center, a system where sympathy generated donations, donations generated power, and children were reduced to assets, kept quiet, kept hidden, and used until they were no longer profitable. If you believe children should never be treated as property, share this video and tap like before we continue. Silence is how systems like this survive. The trail did not end at the orphanage. It led outward, into steel, concrete, and gunfire. 30 miles outside New York City, beyond industrial warehouses and dead-end roads, federal surveillance confirmed the existence of a fortified compound tied to the Venezuelan cartel known as Los Cazadores. From the air, it looked like a logistics depot. On the ground, it was a fortress. Reinforced walls, elevated guard towers, motion sensors, armed patrols rotating every 15 minutes. Inside were the missing pieces: drug production, human trafficking coordination, and organ extraction facilities. And according to intercepted communications, hundreds of hostages were being held alive. At 3:42 a.m., the operation began. Drones cut silently through the dark, mapping heat signatures behind concrete barriers. Infrared confirmed armed positions. At least 120 fighters, many former mercenaries carrying automatic rifles and anti-vehicle weapons. Federal command authorized a full tactical breach. The first explosion shattered the outer gate. Gunfire erupted instantly. Tracer rounds tore through the night as armored vehicles rolled forward, 6 barrel guns spinning, suppressing enemy fire. Helicopters hovered overhead, floodlights pinning targets in white-hot cones. Los Cazadores fighters returned fire from rooftops and firing slits, turning the compound into a kill zone. Inside the perimeter, teams advanced room by room. In the main corridor, an FBI agent was hit, rounds tearing through his shoulder and leg. He refused evacuation. Bleeding, he dragged himself behind cover and continued firing to protect the team moving past him. Body cameras later captured his voice, steady through pain. "Go, I've got rear." The fighting intensified near the underground levels. Cartel forces attempted to torch evidence. Drug labs, surgical rooms, holding cells. Agents pushed through smoke and debris as explosions rocked the structure. In one chamber, they found dozens of captives chained together, some too weak to stand. Medics moved in under fire, cutting restraints while tactical teams held the line. After 40 brutal minutes, resistance collapsed. More than 200 cartel fighters were killed or captured. Federal units secured the compound and uncovered the full scale of the operation. Tens of tons of narcotics, heavy weapon stockpiles, mobile operating rooms, refrigerated transport units prepared for human cargo. Most importantly, hundreds of hostages were alive. As dawn broke, stretchers lined the perimeter. Children, teenagers, adults who had disappeared without records, without witnesses, without hope. One by one, they were carried into the light. The fortress had fallen, but what it revealed would haunt every agent who stepped inside. Because this was not just a cartel stronghold, it was an industrial machine built to destroy human lives, efficiently, quietly, and for profit. Federal agents stopped one fortress, but the network was far bigger. Subscribe to this channel to see how the money kept it alive. Once the guns fell silent, the investigation moved to what truly sustained the operation: money. And the numbers were staggering. Financial analysts began with the orphanage's public accounts. On paper, it was one of the most successful charitable institutions in the region. Monthly inflows averaged $34 million, drawn from church donations, private foundations, online fundraisers, and corporate charity events. Over 5 years, more than $2 billion passed through accounts registered under religious and humanitarian exemptions. But when agents traced where the money actually went, the illusion collapsed. Less than 8% of donations were spent on food, clothing, or basic utilities. There was no budget for schooling, no licensed teachers. Medical expenses existed, but they were classified, paid to shell companies, and never linked to pediatric care. The rest of the money vanished into a maze of offshore transfers, cryptocurrency wallets, and domestic shell corporations. Every trail led back to the same clearinghouse: Los Cazadores. Cartel accountants had embedded themselves inside the charity's financial structure. Donation money was merged with drug revenue, then laundered together. Clean money hid dirty money. Dirty money inflated the scale of the charity, attracting even more donations. It was a self-feeding loop. Sympathy became capital. Capital became power. Internal documents revealed monthly inventory projections. The language was chilling. Children were listed alongside revenue forecasts. Ages, physical condition, and transfer windows were tracked with the same precision used for narcotics shipments. The orphanage wasn't just sheltering children. It was warehousing assets. Drug manufacturing at the cartel compound explained the next layer. Heroin and synthetic opioids produced there were distributed along East Coast routes. Profits were funneled back into the orphanage under the guise of anonymous religious donations. In effect, narcotics funded abuse, and abuse funded narcotics. Investigators also uncovered payments to silence potential scrutiny. Inspectors were delayed. Complaints disappeared. Zoning violations were forgiven. Each obstacle had a price, and the organization paid it quietly. The orphanage's religious status shielded it from routine audits, while its public image discouraged deeper questioning. One ledger entry summarized the entire operation in a single line: diversification reduces risk. Children, drugs, donations, organs. Multiple revenue streams ensured that if one collapsed, the others continued. For years, no single agency saw the full picture. Social services saw a crowded orphanage. Financial regulators saw a successful charity. Local police saw no complaints that stuck. Each fragment alone seemed survivable. Together, they formed a criminal enterprise of breathtaking scale. This was not greed in isolation. It was organized exploitation, engineered, financed, and protected by money moving faster than morality. And by the time the system was exposed, the damage was already measured not in dollars, but in lives quietly consumed to keep the machine running. If you've ever donated to a charity, ask yourself this question: who is really watching the money? Comment your thoughts below. To understand how this happened, investigators had to confront an uncomfortable truth. The architect of the orphanage did not begin as a criminal. Before the money, before the compound, before the cartel connections, Fatima Grace was a struggling caregiver. Records showed she once worked informal childcare jobs, living paycheck to paycheck. Years earlier, she had taken in 2 abandoned children out of genuine compassion. Photos from that time showed a modest apartment, donated toys, shared meals. Neighbors described her as quiet, devout, and sincere. Then the story went public. A short video circulated online. Fatima, in religious dress, speaking softly about caring for unwanted children when no one else would. The response was immediate. Donations poured in. Churches shared the link. Community groups rallied. Within weeks, thousands of dollars became hundreds of thousands. Within months, millions. The first mistake was believing the attention would fade. It didn't. As the money grew, so did her authority. Oversight disappeared. Gratitude replaced scrutiny. Volunteers stopped asking questions. When critics raised concerns about overcrowding or secrecy, they were dismissed as attacking a charity. Fatima learned that virtue, when displayed convincingly, could silence doubt. By the time the orphanage expanded into a formal institution, the transformation was complete. Children arrived faster than resources. Control replaced care. Rules replaced compassion. Discipline became punishment, and punishment became routine. Investigators later identified the turning point, the first private meeting with intermediaries connected to Los Cazadores. What began as security assistance became financial guidance, then logistics, then diversification. Fatima was told the truth gradually, in pieces small enough to accept. The money, she was assured, would protect the children, expand the mission, secure the future. Instead, it consumed it. Ledgers showed how language shifted over time. Children were no longer listed by name, but by age and category. Compassionate notes vanished, replaced by efficiency metrics. Monthly reports tracked capacity, turnover, and loss. Each word marked another step away from humanity. Witness testimony confirmed that Fatima enforced the system personally. She approved transfers. She signed off on removals. She ordered silence. When staff hesitated, she reminded them that obedience was service, and that questioning her was questioning God. In interviews after her arrest, she offered no coherent defense. She spoke of destiny, of sacrifice, of a greater purpose only she could see. But evidence showed no coercion, no threats forcing her hand. The decisions were hers, repeated, calculated, profitable. She did not wake up one day as a monster. She became one through a series of choices, each justified, each rewarded, each easier than the last. And by the time the system collapsed, mercy had long since been replaced by control, faith by fear, and charity by a machine that fed on the very children it claimed to save. When the operation ended, the true cost of the system emerged, not in ledgers or seized assets, but in the condition of the children who walked out alive. Emergency teams processed hundreds of survivors over the next 48 hours. Many were dehydrated. Some were underweight by 20 to 30% for their age. Several had untreated fractures that had healed incorrectly. Others showed surgical scars that did not match any legitimate medical history. Psychologists noted the same pattern again and again. Flat affect, delayed responses, eyes trained to the floor. These were not children who had just been rescued. These were children who had learned that silence was survival. Medical examinations uncovered long-term damage. Repeated sedation had affected memory and concentration. Hormonal disruption was common. In older boys, signs of invasive procedures were documented and matched to equipment recovered at the cartel compound. For many, the physical injuries would take years to heal. Some would never fully recover. The psychological trauma ran deeper. Children described being moved at night without explanation. Names replaced by numbers. Punishments delivered without reason. Trust is systematically broken. When asked why they hadn't screamed or tried to escape, one child answered simply, "No one ever came before." Federal Family Services worked around the clock to place survivors into protective care. Each child was classified as a high-risk victim of organized crime. New identities were prepared, relocation plans drawn up. In several cases, returning to relatives was impossible. Families had been paid off, threatened, or were never real to begin with. As the children were stabilized, evidence teams continued their work. Recovered hard drives detailed years of trafficking routes, donor lists, cartel payments, and encrypted communications. The scope was wider than initially believed. The orphanage had functioned as a recruitment and sorting hub, one node in a larger international network. What was dismantled in New York was only one artery of a much bigger system. Court proceedings would take years, appeals would follow, assets would be seized and redistributed. None of it would restore what had been taken. For the children, recovery began with small steps. Eating without permission, sleeping without locks, learning that doors could open outward, that uniforms did not mean control, that kindness did not require payment. Some asked the same question repeatedly. Why us? No answer satisfied. At a temporary shelter, one boy stood by a window for the first time in years and watched traffic pass. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. He simply stood there, absorbing a world that had continued without him. The operation had ended a machine built on exploitation. But survival was only the beginning. For these children, freedom arrived quietly, fragile, uncertain, and heavy with memory. And every step forward would remind investigators of the truth they could not escape. Stopping the crime saved lives, but nothing could give these children back the years that were stolen. The story does not end with arrests and rescues, because what allowed this crime to exist was not only greed, it was neglect. Across the country, thousands of children enter the system every year, not because of war or disaster, but because they are unwanted. Some are abandoned at hospitals, some are left at fire stations, others are simply never picked up again. Behind every case file is a decision made quietly, often in desperation, sometimes in convenience. Modern society rarely talks about the aftermath. We debate abortion, responsibility, and choice, but we speak far less about what happens to children who survive those decisions and are then discarded. The foster system is overloaded. Group homes are understaffed. Caseworkers carry impossible caseloads. Oversight breaks down not from malice, but from exhaustion. That vacuum creates opportunity. Where protection weakens, predators move in. Criminal networks do not hunt randomly. They look for children with no advocates, no consistent records, no one asking questions. Orphans, runaways, children signed over, forgotten, or mislabeled as unplaced. When the system loses track, someone else finds them. This is the dark side no one campaigns on. Charity becomes a substitute for policy. Sympathy replaces structure. Donations flow, but accountability does not. We reassure ourselves that good intentions are enough, until they aren't. Until a place meant to protect becomes a warehouse. Until children become invisible inventory. The responsibility does not rest on one institution or one criminal. It rests on a society that treats vulnerable children as a secondary issue, important in speeches, optional in budgets. We fund prisons faster than foster care. We debate ideology louder than we invest in prevention. Children do not choose to be born into instability. They do not choose abandonment. They do not choose silence. If the state does not protect them, someone else will claim them, and not for mercy. This case exposed an extreme example, but the conditions that allowed it are ordinary. Underfunded child services, fragmented databases, weak follow-up, religious or charitable shields that block scrutiny. Each gap alone seems manageable. Together they become fatal. Real protection requires more than reaction after tragedy. It requires early support for parents in crisis, safe, monitored alternatives for unwanted children, transparent oversight of every institution entrusted with a child's life, and a refusal to look away when compassion becomes uncomfortable. These children were not failed once. They were failed repeatedly by systems designed to protect them. Until society treats every abandoned child as a shared responsibility, the shadows will remain, and somewhere another door will close quietly behind a child who believes no one is coming. That belief is what must end. This story ends where many others never do, with the truth exposed and lives saved. What stopped this operation was not luck, it was vigilance, it was discipline, and it was the resolve of American law enforcement to act when the cost of inaction became unacceptable. Agents who walked through those doors did not know what they would find. They moved anyway. They chose responsibility over comfort, evidence over excuses, and protection over silence. That matters, because systems like this do not collapse on their own. They survive in shadows, behind paperwork, donations, titles, and trust. They survive when no one is willing to look closer. In this case, American investigators did. They followed facts, not appearances. They coordinated across agencies. They took risks so children they had never met could live another day. This is what public service looks like when it works, but enforcement alone is not enough. The deeper lesson is uncomfortable and necessary. Vigilance cannot end after the raid. Protection cannot depend on tragedy. Oversight must be constant. Compassion must be paired with accountability. And every institution entrusted with children must be watched, not once, but always. The men and women who carried children into the morning light did their job. Now the responsibility widens to communities, to donors, to policymakers, and to all of us who choose whether to ask questions or look away. If you believe that protecting children is a duty, not a debate, like this video. If you believe crimes hidden behind good intentions must be exposed, comment your thoughts below. And if you want to support stories that honor accountability, courage, and the rule of law, subscribe to this channel, because justice doesn't begin with outrage. It begins with attention, and as long as people are watching, the shadows have fewer places to hide.
Un saludo, hermanos y hermanas, desde el monasterio de la luz de Nuestra Señora de Fátima. Yo algunas veces, cuando estoy, pues algunas veces para acá, para allá, no, mis cosas no. Y cuando me toca hacer estos vídeos, no, yo ahora me estaba viniendo, pues, la gente que vea estos vídeos, muchos no sé qué realidad viven. Es la pregunta que me hago algunas veces, ¿no? No sé si esto les parecerá que es real, o que esto es mentira, o que no, que sé. Sería la cuestión en todo esto. La verdad que me parece increíble, ¿no? Que todavía a estas alturas, ¿no? En los últimos tiempos, ¿no? Pues haya mucha gente que se plantee si puede ser que esto sea verdad o sea mentira, ¿no? Entonces la pregunta que se tiene que hacer la gente es de dónde vive, ¿no? Si de verdad está informada de verdad o realmente a qué dedica el tiempo, ¿no? Es la pregunta que se tiene que hacer, ¿no? Yo la verdad es que hombre, no he tenido mucho tiempo para muchas más cosas de las que me gustarían hacer, la verdad. Dedicar tiempo a otras labores de investigación, ¿no? Porque ya sabéis que el tema de la empresa a mí me quita tiempo, ¿no? Y ahora todo es mucho más, un poco de oficina, ¿no? Y la verdad me gustaría hacer un poco algo más de campo, ¿no? Pero bueno, ya sabéis que tengo restricciones por parte de ahí arriba, ¿no? Y bueno, estoy un poco limitado, ¿no? Pero no quita que yo sepa que estas cosas son así, que son reales, que esto es así. Porque solamente el hecho de, como he dicho ya anteriormente, el número de desapariciones que hay a nivel mundial, y en España di el dato, ahora no me acuerdo, pero es un número bestial. Es una cosa que en un planeta desaparezca la gente y nadie se tire de los cabellos y le parezca todo algo como normal, o como es el tema del tráfico de, ya no humano, sino luego encima el tema de tantas cosas como hay, el tráfico de órganos, el tema el tráfico luego para el tema de la pornografía infantil, el tema para tanto ritual como hay. Y es una cosa que yo con todo esto, con todos estos vídeos, lo que quiero hacer es que la gente despierte. Los últimos tiempos son para despertar, para ser conscientes, ¿no? de todo el mal que hay, que siempre ha habido. Porque los medios públicos no te van a contar esto, porque los medios públicos son de ellos. Y es así. Por eso me parece algunas veces tan increíble muchas veces, ¿no? O no debería serlo, ¿no? Por la sencilla razón de que hay mucha gente que no sé dónde vive, ¿no? Yo cuando he hablado en alguna ocasión, pocas, la verdad, son muy pocas, pues no quieren ni que hable. No quieren ni que hable, ¿no? Yo sé que mucha gente a lo mejor quiere oír cosas bonitas y maravillosas, ¿no? Pero es que la vida no es así. Somos nosotros los que tenemos que cambiar toda la oscuridad que hay y denunciar todo esto. Tenemos que sacarlo a la luz, porque si algo no quiere Satán justamente es esto, que todas estas cosas no salgan a la luz. ¿Por qué? Pues creo que es evidente, ¿no? ¿Por qué? Pero todos estos casos han sido desde el principio. Las fuerzas de la oscuridad lo que han hecho ha sido siempre todo lo contrario, ¿no? Romper la inocencia, dañar todo lo que va contra Dios es así, van todo al revés. Es lo que han hecho las fuerzas de la oscuridad, los satánicos son siempre así. Por eso todos estos vídeos van en esta línea, ¿no? Para sacar todo a la luz, porque los últimos tiempos son revelación, no lo olvidéis. Sacar a la verdad, ¿no? Para que la gente se vaya enterando, ¿no? En el planeta en el que viven, ¿no? De cómo funciona un poco todo esto, ¿no? Porque lo que yo quiero que la gente entienda es esto. Y esto no hay que mirar para un lado ni para otro. Esto hay que enfrentarse realmente al mal. ¿Y qué puedo hacer yo? ¿Qué puedo hacer yo para poder erradicar todo esto y denunciar, ¿no? todo lo que es sobre todo esto. Esto hay que sacarlo a la luz y es así como tiene que ser. Si no, ¿cómo queréis que todo esto vaya mejor? No puede ir. Los últimos tiempos son precisamente para sacar todo lo malo que hay, ponerlo ahí encima y que la gente tome, digamos, carta en el asunto y ver qué se hace con todo esto. La mejor manera es, hay que erradicar a todos los siervos de Satán. Eso no hay otra para acabar con todo esto. Por eso, últimamente voy en esta línea, ¿no? Porque creo que hay mucha gente, pues, que tiene miedo. Es una cosa que me parece, ¿miedo a qué? No sé, ¿miedo a qué? ¿A los satánicos? ¿A lo que han hecho durante siempre? Pues es que eso también lo sabemos. Y por eso siempre hay que sacar a la luz todo esto, ¿no? Porque es lo que han hecho siempre, ¿no? Y creo que estamos en los tiempos en los cuales hay que denunciarlo, ¿no? Y sacarlo, ¿no? Yo todavía sigue habiendo mucho secuestro, ¿no? Y muchas cosas, ¿no? Muy desagradables, ¿no? El tema de la oscuridad, hay muchas cosas que yo me gustaría que toda la gente fuera consciente, ¿no? De por qué pasa todo esto, ¿no? Por qué hay tanto ritual, ¿no? Satánico, ¿no? Y que entendieran un poco más del mundo de Satán, ¿no? Del mundo de la oscuridad, ¿no? Y por eso, bueno, intento con estos vídeos traer un poco luz a todo esto, ¿no? Y que no hay que, eso hay que coger el toro por los cuernos, esto no se puede mirar para el otro lado. Sé que hay mucha gente, porque posiblemente con todos estos temas, pues a lo mejor incluso es posible que sea mucho la primera vez que escuchen algo sobre todo esto, ¿no? Y quién se ha estado dedicando a todo esto durante tanto tiempo, ¿no? Y ya lo he dicho yo en el vídeo anterior, y es el Vaticano. El Vaticano, allí se entraron las fuerzas de la oscuridad, ¿no? Y sus dirigentes son satánicos, son los que han estado durante mucho tiempo. Y claro, no ha habido nadie, ¿no? que haya enfrentado, ¿no? al Vaticano, ¿no? Con todo el tema de tantas tramas, ¿no? De tantos tentáculos como tiene, ¿no? Durante tanto tiempo ha ido, digamos, desarrollando, ¿no? Por este camino, ¿no? Y evidentemente eso es así. Siempre se ha contado muchas cosas, ¿no? Y se ha silenciado mucha gente, ¿no? Se ha matado mucha gente. Bueno, es el modus operandi del Vaticano, siempre han sido así, ¿no? Y eso es algo que hay que sacarlo a la luz y tiene que salir, porque para eso son los últimos tiempos, para sacar todo y para que la gente decida y tome su camino, si el que quiera seguir, ¿no? Porque es algo que es así. Por eso ya sabéis que tampoco me quería enrollar mucho con todo esto. Yo creo que lo que toca también es que mucha gente también cambie un poco su línea editorial, ¿no? El tema de que no siempre hay que hablar de las cosas que van a gustar a la gente, ¿no? Creo que también hay que hablar de las cosas que no van a gustar, ¿no? Yo ya he dicho, ¿no? Que no gusta esto, ¿no? Pero que esto es una realidad. Esto existe y hay tramas, hay un montón de cosas. Tenemos el tema, si lo tenemos en España. En España está. España. Lo que hay que hacer es ponerse manos a la obra y empezar con todo esto, ¿no? Porque esto no podemos traer algo bueno si un montón de criaturas, pues imaginaros, es que poneros en su lugar, en el lugar de todos estos niños, ¿no? En los cuales sois abusados, sois torturados. Yo no quiero ni pensarlo. Ya os conté mi experiencia con dos que he visto, ¿no? Y entonces yo es que me pongo a llorar. Es algo que es así. Por eso no voy a seguir más, me quedo por aquí, porque si no me voy a poner a llorar, como he dicho, y eso es que eso es muy fuerte para mí. Imaginaros, ¿no? Todo lo que hay detrás de todo esto, ¿no? Por eso creo que estamos en los tiempos en los cuales hay que poner cartas en el asunto y coger esto al toro por los cuernos y empezar a rezar a gente. Es lo que hay que hacer. No hay que hacer otra cosa. Es poner a disposición judicial de la luz azul, como todos sabéis, y sacando todas estas criaturas de la oscuridad del panorama en el cual se encuentran, porque el daño que están haciendo pues es muy, muy grande. Y sobre todo porque son los que el dinero. No olvidéis, el dinero es al que hay que seguir siempre, al dinero. Y el dinero es de dónde viene y a dónde va y quién se beneficia de todo ello. Es lo que tenéis que entender en todo esto. Siempre tenemos que seguir el dinero y desmantelar todo. Hay que desmantelar todo. Y lo máximo responsable, ya sabéis, a disposición de la luz azul. No hay otra. Y quitar todos estos eso y mandarlos a la cárcel y que pasen el resto de su vida ahí, porque ya no tiene otra cabida. Eso es ya de por vida, hasta que pasen al otro lado, que es con su jefe, que ya sabemos quién es, que es al infierno. Por lo tanto, venga, un saludo y un beso muy fuerte desde el Monasterio de la Luz de Nuestra Señora de Fátima. ¡Mua!